The relationship between the United States and China is one of the most important in the world. It is also incredibly complex. For over 75 years, these two global giants have been on a roller coaster ride. They've experienced moments of cooperation and periods of intense rivalry. Understanding this dynamic relationship is crucial for anyone who wants to make sense of global politics and economics. Why is the U.S. China relationship so important? Well, for starters, they are the world's two largest economies. What happens between them affects everyone. They also have very different political systems and ideologies. This can lead to misunderstandings and disagreements. Despite their differences, the U.S. and China need to find ways to work together. They face common challenges like climate change and global pandemics. The future of the world may depend on their ability to cooperate, so buckle up. We are about to take a wild ride through the history of U.S.-China relations. We will explore the key events and turning points that have shaped this fascinating and consequential relationship. Our story begins in the mid-19th century. The U.S. was a young nation, eager to expand its trade and influence. China, on the other hand, was a vast and ancient empire. It had largely closed itself off from the outside world. American merchants saw an opportunity in China. They wanted to sell American goods to the Chinese market. In 1844, the U.S. signed the Treaty of Guangxia with China. This treaty opened up trade between the two countries. However, the relationship soon became strained. The U.S. and other Western powers forced China to grant them special privileges. This led to resentment and instability within China. The Chinese Revolution of 1911 overthrew the last imperial dynasty. The country descended into chaos and civil war. The U.S. and other powers became increasingly involved in Chinese affairs. This further complicated an already messy situation. In 1949, the Chinese Communist Party, led by Mao Zedong, emerged victorious from the Civil War. This marked a turning point in U.S.-China relations. The U.S. refused to recognize the new communist government. It continued to support the rival nationalist government in Taiwan. The Cold War had begun, and the U.S. and China were now on opposite sides. The Cold War cast a long shadow over U.S.-China relations. The two countries found themselves on opposite sides of conflicts in Korea and Vietnam. Suspicion and mistrust ran deep. However, by the late 1960s, the geopolitical landscape was shifting. The Sino-Soviet split created a rift between China and the Soviet Union. U.S. President Richard Nixon saw an opportunity. He believed that improving relations with China could serve U.S. interests by driving a wedge between China and the Soviet Union. In 1972, Nixon made a historic trip to China. He met with Mao Zedong and Premier Zhou Enlai. The visit was a diplomatic breakthrough. It paved the way for a gradual thaw in U.S.-China relations. Following Nixon's visit, the U.S. and China began a process of normalization. In 1979, the U.S. formally recognized the People's Republic of China as the sole legal government of China. This meant cutting off formal diplomatic relations with Taiwan. However, the U.S. also passed the Taiwan Relations Act. This act committed the U.S. to providing Taiwan with the means to defend itself. This period also saw China embark on a path of economic reform and opening up under Deng Xiaoping. China's economy began to grow at an unprecedented rate. The U.S., eager to tap into this new market, increased trade and investment in China. The 1980s and 1990s were a time of both deepening economic ties and growing political friction between the U.S. and China. On the one hand, trade between the two countries expanded rapidly. American companies invested heavily in China, attracted by its low labor costs and vast market. On the other hand, the U.S. continued to express concerns about China's human rights record, its lack of democracy, and its trade practices. The 1989 Tiananmen Square massacre, when the Chinese government violently cracked down on pro-democracy protesters, sent shockwaves through the U.S. and led to a temporary cooling of relations. Despite these tensions, the U.S. supported China's entry into the World Trade Organization in 2001. The hope was that bringing China into the rules-based global trading system would encourage it to adopt more open and market-oriented policies. This decision would have far-reaching consequences for both countries and the global economy. The Dragon Soars: China's Rise and Global Ambitions. The early 21st century witnessed the dramatic rise of China as a global power. Fueled by its booming economy, China rapidly modernized its military, expanded its diplomatic influence, and asserted its presence on the world stage. The United States, while still the world's sole superpower, began to view China's growing might with a mix of awe and apprehension. Some saw China's rise as a threat to U.S. dominance. Others believed that the United States and China could find ways to cooperate and manage their differences. Several developments heightened tensions between the U.S. and China during this period. China's increasingly assertive actions in the South China Sea, its crackdown on dissent in Hong Kong, and its human rights abuses in Xinjiang province drew sharp criticism from the United States and its allies. The U.S. also became increasingly wary of China's technological advancements, particularly in areas like artificial intelligence and 5G telecommunications. Trade wars and tech battles, Trump's confrontational approach. The election of Donald Trump as U.S. president in 2016 ushered in a new and more confrontational chapter in U.S. China relations. Trump had long been critical of China's trade practices, accusing Beijing of unfair competition and intellectual property theft. In 2018, Trump launched a trade war with China, imposing tariffs on billions of dollars worth of Chinese goods. China retaliated with tariffs of its own. The trade war rattled global markets and strained the economic relationship between the two countries. Beyond trade, the Trump administration took a hard line on China on multiple fronts. It sanctioned Chinese companies for their involvement in human rights abuses in Xinjiang, and for their ties to the Chinese military. It also sought to limit Chinese companies' access to sensitive U.S. technology, particularly in the telecommunications sector. Trump's confrontational approach to China enjoyed bipartisan support in the U.S. It reflected a growing consensus that China had not lived up to the expectations that accompanied its entry into the WTO, and that a more assertive approach was needed to counter its unfair trade practices and its increasingly assertive behavior on the global stage. A new Cold War? Tensions under Biden. The Biden administration, which took office in 2021, inherited a U.S.-China relationship that was at its lowest point in decades. While President Joe Biden has sought to strike a less confrontational tone than his predecessor, he has largely maintained Trump's tough stance on China. The Biden administration has continued to pressure China on issues like human rights, trade practices, and intellectual property theft. It has also strengthened ties with allies in the Asia-Pacific region, seeking to build a united front against China's growing assertiveness. One of the most significant developments in the U.S.-China relationship under Biden has been the growing focus on technological competition. The Biden administration has taken steps to restrict China's access to advanced semiconductors and other critical technologies, viewing this as essential to maintaining U.S. technological leadership and national security. The U.S. and China have also clashed over Taiwan. The Biden administration has reaffirmed its commitment to the One China policy, which acknowledges that there is only one China, but considers the status of Taiwan to be unsettled. However, the U.S. has also stepped up its support for Taiwan, providing it with arms sales and increasing its military presence in the region. Cooperation or conflict, navigating a complex future. As we look ahead, the U.S.-China relationship faces a complex and uncertain future. The two countries are locked in a strategic competition that spans multiple domains: economic, technological, geopolitical, and ideological. They have fundamental differences in their values and their visions for the international order. Yet, despite these challenges, the U.S. and China also have a shared interest in avoiding conflict and in cooperating on pressing global issues like climate change, pandemics, and nuclear proliferation. The question is whether they can manage their competition and find ways to work together on these shared challenges. Several factors will shape the future trajectory of U.S.-China relations. Domestic politics in both countries will play a role, so too will the actions of other countries, as the U.S. and China compete for influence and partnerships around the world. And of course, unforeseen events, a global crisis, a technological breakthrough, a political upheaval, could easily upend the relationship and send it on a new course. The U.S. and China, a relationship that will shape the 21st century. The U.S.-China relationship is the defining geopolitical challenge of our time. It is a relationship fraught with complexity, contradiction, and consequence. Understanding the history and the dynamics of this relationship is essential for anyone who wants to make sense of the world today and the world of tomorrow. The U.S. and China are not destined for conflict. But avoiding conflict will require both sides to manage their differences responsibly, to seek common ground where possible, and to build a framework for peaceful coexistence in the 21st century. The stakes could not be higher. The choices that the U.S. and China make in the years ahead will have profound implications for the future of both countries, and for the fate of the world. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe to our channel for more updates and insights. We'd love to hear your thoughts. Drop your views in the comments below. Until next time, stay informed and take care.